It's April 11, 1986, a peaceful Miami morning. Two FBI agents, Ben Grogan and Jerry Dove, spot a car they've been desperately searching for, a stolen black Chevrolet Monte Carlo. Inside this car are two of the most dangerous criminals the FBI has ever encountered, Michael Platt and William Matix. But what these agents don't know is that within minutes, they'll find themselves in the deadliest gunfight in FBI history. What unfolds next is a brutal battle. Agents outgunned, outmatched by these ruthless former soldiers, armed with military-grade weapons and tactical precision. This deadly confrontation wouldn't just shock the nation, it would forever change how law enforcement prepares for battle. But even more shocking was what investigators later discovered about these seemingly ordinary men, whose lives hid dark, terrifying secrets. This is the story of how two thieves brought the FBI to the brink, and how their violent reign finally came to an end. Our story takes place in the city of Miami, Florida. In 1985, the crime rate in this city rose significantly. Florida in general has always been known for its problems and crime. And as crime rates spiked that year, two men, or rather, two thieves, emerged. These thieves used extremely violent methods in their operations and never hesitated to open fire on anyone who got in their way. Their first appearance was on October 8, 1985. An armored cash transport truck was parked next to a restaurant. These trucks are responsible for collecting cash from various businesses like restaurants and then depositing it at the bank. Of course, these trucks are bulletproof and their drivers and guards are armed. The driver is supposed to stay in the truck while the guard steps out to collect the money from the businesses. But neither the driver nor the guard knew that two men were lying in wait for them, hiding between the cars parked near the restaurant. These two men were the thieves our story revolves around. The thieves were heavily armed, one carrying a shotgun, and the other a Mini-14 assault rifle. These are military-grade weapons, not something the average person would own. Even their outfits were military style, and they wore black masks over their faces and black gloves on their hands. When the guard who had gone inside to collect the money came out of the restaurant, the two men ambushed him, attacked, and ordered him to open the truck. But the guard kept telling them he couldn't. He didn't have the keys. He told them only the driver could open the doors. So the thieves quickly dragged the guard over to the driver and demanded he open up. Money transport companies have strict protocols for these situations. The driver is absolutely forbidden from opening the doors under any circumstances, no matter the threat. So the driver refused. The guard, who was in the thieves' hands, knew the protocol too and knew there was no way the driver would open the doors. He was just waiting for the right moment to make a move. When he noticed the thieves were focused on the driver, he took off running as fast as he could. The driver also took the opportunity to drive off, putting distance between them and the attackers. The thieves opened fire on the truck, but since it was armored, it wasn't affected. It was clear these two men were fully prepared to use deadly force. They were actually trying to kill the driver. They even tried shooting directly through the window. Even though they knew the truck was bulletproof, the fact that they fired like that shows they had every intention to kill. Immediately afterward, according to witnesses, the two thieves retreated to their car, a white vehicle, and quickly fled the scene. The police were notified right away, and they arrived promptly along with the FBI, since any attack or attempted robbery of an armored truck falls under their jurisdiction. These trucks are federally protected. Investigators and police started inspecting the scene, questioning witnesses, and trying to gather any possible clues that could lead them to the thieves. But unfortunately, there wasn't even a single lead to follow. The thieves had left no trace behind, and the witnesses only saw two men wearing masks and military-style clothing. Even their skin color wasn't visible. The only thing the investigators managed to get from witnesses was the license plate number of the getaway vehicle. But as expected, the car had been reported stolen a month earlier. So that lead also hit a dead end. When investigators questioned the guard who had been subdued by the thieves, he told them that based on their movements, it was clear they were using military tactics. Even when they fired at the truck, only one of them was shooting while the other was covering his back. A military maneuver, not something typical of gangsters. The only money the thieves managed to steal was the cash the guard was carrying as he left the restaurant, which amounted to $2,800, a small sum, making the whole operation a failure. The investigators were convinced that criminals this skilled wouldn't settle for failure. They would surely try again. And sure enough, just 8 days later, on October 16, 1985, not far from the location of the first attempted robbery, there was another armored truck parked outside a supermarket. The driver was waiting by the truck while the second guard had gone into the store to collect the money. When the guard came back carrying the money bags, the driver opened the truck's rear door so they could load them in. And that was the moment the thieves had been waiting for. They'd been watching from a distance and had decided not to repeat their previous mistake of attacking while the doors were locked. This time, the attack had to happen when the doors were open. As soon as they saw the guards open the truck doors, the thieves sped toward them in their car. The guards didn't notice them at all. They were too focused on loading the money bags. But this time, it seemed the thieves came with deadly intent. One of them popped out of the car's sunroof with a weapon, and as soon as they got close enough, he opened fire. The guard carrying the bags was hit and immediately fell to the ground. He was wearing a bulletproof vest under his clothes, but the shotgun blast knocked him down. The second guard, the driver, quickly pulled out his gun and returned fire. The thieves fired back, trying to kill or at least injure him the way they had his partner. The goal was to take him out, but the driver put up fierce resistance, and when the thieves realized the shootout was dragging on too long, they decided to retreat and flee. They knew the police would respond quickly, and their window of time was limited, so when they failed to take down the guard fast enough, they opted for the safer choice and got out of there. The police and the FBI quickly arrived at the scene. Paramedics also showed up and took the injured guard away. Unfortunately, the guard later died in the hospital from his injuries, even though he was wearing a bulletproof vest. A shotgun blast from that close range was enough to kill him. Investigators, of course, questioned the second guard, the driver, who had exchanged fire with the robbers. From his testimony, it was clear these were the same two men who had tried to rob the first armored truck outside the restaurant 8 days earlier. After the FBI analyzed the shell casings the robbers left behind, they confirmed that the same weapons were used. They matched the bullets from this scene with those from the earlier incident and confirmed it was the same two robbers. The FBI agents were even more concerned this time. It was obvious these two were willing to resort to violence easily. This was their second failed attempt, and this time they didn't get away with a single dollar. So who knows what they might do next time? Because it was clear they would try again. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, on Friday, November 8, 1985, the robbers showed up again. But this time, they changed their target. Instead of hitting an armored truck, they decided to hit a bank, the Florida National Bank. The branch was located in a main building with a smaller drive-through bank building on the side. It worked like a drive-through restaurant. You could drive up in your car and withdraw money without getting out. At that moment, a bank teller and a guard were walking out of the main bank building carrying bags of money, heading to the drive-through building to deposit the cash. The robbers had been waiting for this moment. They ambushed the guard, took the money, then, at gunpoint, ordered the teller to open the drive-through bank door. The teller was extremely nervous and tried to obey their orders, but there seemed to be a problem with the keys. Either that or she was too shaken to find the right one. To make things worse, the robbers were yelling at her and demanding she hurry. The poor teller panicked even more and dropped the keys, escalating the tension. The robbers were getting more and more agitated with every passing second, especially since they were standing out in the open, in broad daylight. Even though they were prone to violence, it was clear they still preferred to avoid unnecessary risk. So when they saw the teller taking too long to open the door, they decided to bail, taking only the cash they'd grabbed from the guard, and quickly fled the scene. This time, their haul was $10,000, better than last time, but still far below expectations. As usual, the police and FBI arrived on the scene right away. After questioning both the teller and the guard, they immediately connected this robbery to the previous two. And get this, the bank was just one street over from the sites of the first two robberies. Investigators started to notice a pattern. All the hits were happening in the same area, and they were convinced the robbers would keep going. But what they didn't expect was that just an hour and a half after the drive-through bank incident, the two robbers would hit a second bank, the savings bank, only 4 kilometers away. The two robbers stormed into the bank and ordered everyone to lie down on the floor. One of them, armed with a shotgun, stayed with the customers, while the other, carrying a Mini 14 rifle, went to one of the employees and ordered her to hand over all the money. Once he got the cash, the two of them quickly exited the bank. This time, the loot was much bigger, $41,000. The money had just arrived at the bank via an armored truck. Apparently, the robbers had tailed the truck, watched it unload the money, and then made their move. After the two thieves completed their operation and fled, this time they used a gray Chevrolet Monte Carlo, a different car from the white one they had before, and it was definitely stolen too. Investigators arrived at the bank and started questioning the witnesses, but there was nothing new. The same usual descriptions. Two masked men carrying heavy weapons. The investigators were hopeful they'd get some footage from the surveillance cameras inside the bank, but unfortunately, the cameras were apparently malfunctioning and weren't working. That left the investigators feeling a sense of helplessness. They literally had no leads to track these two men. 4 robberies, and they hadn't found a single clue. All they had were just assumptions. The main assumption, of course, was that these two men might be police officers or even former military personnel, since every witness confirmed that their movements, the way they spoke, and how they handled their weapons all pointed to professional military tactics. After the last bank robbery, the case went cold for a while. 2 months passed without any new heists. The thieves had vanished, but then they showed up again on Friday, January 10, 1986. On that day, an armored money truck was parked in front of a bank called Barnett Bank. The guards were unloading the cash from the truck and taking it into the bank. At the same time, a man named William Roberts was sitting in his car nearby. He was a bank customer who had come to deposit some money into his account. He immediately noticed something odd when a car pulled up behind the armored truck. The two men inside were wearing masks. That instantly raised his suspicion. He saw them get out of the car, raise their weapons, and shoot the guard in the back. And to make sure they had finished him off, one of them shot him 2 more times after he hit the ground, killing him. They quickly grabbed the money from the truck, loaded it into their car, and fled the scene. This time, their haul was bigger, worth $54,000. But William Roberts, the eyewitness, immediately started his car and followed them. His nerves were impressively steady. Even after witnessing the guard being murdered right in front of him, he wasn't shaken. On the contrary, he went after them. He was cautious, kept a safe distance, memorized the type of car and the license plate number, and tailed them until they reached a certain parking area. The two thieves parked next to a white pickup truck, and William stopped across the street at a safe distance, watching them from afar. The thieves got out of their car without their masks on. William couldn't see their faces clearly due to the distance, but he could at least tell they had white skin. The thieves moved their weapons and loot from their car into the white pickup truck. Unfortunately, once again, because of the distance, William couldn't catch the license plate number of the pickup. Meanwhile, the police and the FBI arrived at the bank, the scene of the crime. Investigators began examining the area and questioning witnesses and employees. The bullet casings found at the scene confirmed that the same weapons had been used in previous robberies, which meant it was the same two robbers. But luckily this time, they had an important witness, William Roberts. William told them what happened, pointed them to the car the robbers had left behind, and described the white pickup truck they used to escape. Unfortunately, he couldn't catch the license plate number of the truck. So, the investigators had only one lead: the car the robbers left behind. They checked its license plate and found it was registered to someone named Aureliano Briel. There were no reports that the car had been stolen, which made them suspicious that Aureliano might be connected to the criminals, or could even be one of them. Two investigators armed themselves and headed to Aureliano's house. His address was in their database. When they arrived and rang the doorbell, a woman answered. The agents introduced themselves as FBI agents. Then her husband came out to greet them and asked if they were there about their son, Emilio. The investigators didn't know anything about the son, so they replied, "We're here about a car registered in your name." "You're Aureliano, right?" The man replied, "Yes, I'm Aureliano," and invited them inside. Once inside, Aureliano explained that their son had gone missing 3 months ago along with the family car. He said, "Our son Emilio, he's 25 years old, went to practice shooting in an area called Everglades, a remote wilderness area, and he took our family car, which is registered in my name. We haven't seen him since. We filed a missing person report with the police." That's when the investigators understood why the car hadn't been reported stolen. It disappeared along with the family's son. The family had reported a missing person, not a stolen or missing car. Naturally, the parents were disappointed. They had initially hoped the investigators had new information about their son. But it turned out all the agents had was the car. And if anything, that only confirmed their worst fear, that something had likely happened to their son, and that sadly, they might never see him again, dead or alive. In the end, the investigators concluded that this family had nothing to do with the robbers. They, along with their missing son, were just more victims. The investigators and forensic experts thoroughly examined the car, but again, they didn't find any evidence or clues that could lead them to the thieves. No fingerprints, nothing at all. After that robbery, during which the truck guard was killed, the case went cold again. The criminals didn't commit any new crimes, and during the following 2 months, FBI investigators kept working on the case, but without any significant progress. Then, in March 1986, one of the FBI agents came across a news article that caught his attention. It was about an attempted murder involving a man named Jose Collazo. According to the report, 2 men had attacked him, shot at him multiple times, and then stole his gun and his car, a black 1982 Chevrolet Monte Carlo. As soon as the agent read the article, he rushed to his colleagues and said, "Look at this. I'm certain this has something to do with the criminals we're after." He told them that the stolen black car would likely show up in upcoming robberies. His colleagues didn't object to his theory, but they weren't as convinced as he was. He was 100% sure, while they just saw it as a hunch or gut feeling. The article said that this man, Jose, had been shot 4 times but miraculously survived. He managed to reach a small grocery store and called the police and an ambulance. He was currently in the hospital. Even though it was all just a gut feeling, the investigators decided to take the theory seriously. Mainly because the agent who had the hunch was a seasoned investigator, and they couldn't afford to ignore his instincts. So they went to the hospital to talk to Jose and ask him what happened. Jose had sustained serious injuries, 4 gunshot wounds in critical areas of his body, but he agreed to cooperate and started telling them everything. He said he had gone out to an open wilderness area called the Everglades to practice shooting. This reminded the investigators of the couple's son, the one they said was named Emilio, who had taken the family car to that same area, the Everglades, to practice shooting and never came back. The Everglades, located in Florida, were well known for that sort of thing. An open wilderness where people go for shooting practice and hunting. So, Jose told the investigators that he was practicing shooting in that area when a white pickup truck suddenly pulled up behind him. Two men got out. Of course, Jose was surprised. He didn't know them. And they weren't in a populated area for anyone to be approaching him like that. Before he could even react, the two men pointed their weapons at him and demanded his gun, wallet, and car keys. They were extremely aggressive and cursed at him using the filthiest language, even though he didn't resist and handed everything over. Despite his cooperation, one of them shot him. And after he collapsed to the ground, the man approached and shot him 3 more times. Jose should have died from those wounds, especially since the shots were aimed at lethal and sensitive areas. But he survived. Miraculously, he played dead to trick the shooter. Meanwhile, the second man took his car keys, got into the black car, and started it. After the shooter was sure Jose was dead, he got back into the white pickup truck, and the two of them drove off together. After they left, Jose was still lying on the ground, bleeding from deep, life-threatening wounds. The fact that he was even alive was a miracle, but if he wanted to survive, he somehow had to stand up and get out of there. He needed to find someone to help him. And in yet another miracle, he managed to get to his feet and walked about 1.5 kilometers until he reached a small grocery store, where they were able to call for an ambulance. After Jose told them this story, the investigators were convinced that the two men who attacked him were the same criminals they had been searching for. The white pickup truck, the weapons Jose described, their way of speaking, and their violence, all of it matched up. Jose turned out to be the best witness the FBI had gotten so far, the only person who had come face to face with the criminals and survived. So the investigators took down descriptions of the two men from Jose Collazo and brought in a sketch artist to draw composite sketches of them. Then they released a wanted poster with the sketches, details of their crimes, and a warning that these two men were extremely dangerous and heavily armed. The FBI and local police kept up their efforts, focusing especially on finding Jose's car, the black one the criminals had taken. But before they could make any progress in the case, the criminals struck again. On March 19, 1986, they hit another bank in the same area. As usual, they stormed in with heavy weapons and ordered everyone, customers and staff, to get down on the floor. One of them, holding a shotgun, stood guard over the customers while the other, armed with a Mini-14, demanded the cashier hand over the money. In the end, they escaped with about $30,000. After the robbers left, people got up and called the police. This was the 6th robbery the two had committed. As usual, when the investigators arrived and questioned the witnesses, they didn't get anything new. The only fresh lead was some footage from the surveillance cameras, which were working this time. But even that footage didn't help. There was nothing in it that could help identify the two criminals. Based on their analysis of the robberies, the FBI agents were almost certain that the criminals had been watching the banks beforehand, because each robbery happened within just 10 minutes of a fresh cash delivery by armored trucks. It was highly likely that the criminals were following these trucks, and as soon as they saw one drop off money at a bank, they'd target that bank. It didn't seem to matter which bank it was. They were just following the money trucks and hitting wherever the cash went. The investigators began discussing the pattern. Usually, the robberies happened on Fridays between 9:00 a.m. and 12:00 noon, and always within the same area, a radius of no more than 10 kilometers. So the FBI decided to increase patrols in that area as much as possible and focus their search on the white pickup and the black cars stolen from Jose. Days and weeks passed until we reached April 11, 1986, which, by the way, was a Friday. The FBI had been increasing their patrols specifically on Fridays because the pattern showed that these two thieves usually carried out their operations on Fridays, particularly in the morning between 9:00 and 12:00. So on that day, at exactly 8:30 in the morning, 14 FBI agents gathered in one of the parking lots. Their mission was to thoroughly patrol the area over the next 4 hours, covering a radius of up to 12 kilometers. They pulled out a map and marked the streets and routes each patrol would cover. There were 14 agents, 2 per vehicle, which meant 7 cars and 7 patrols in total. The FBI patrols spread out in all directions within the area, keeping especially close to banks, since those were the thieves' usual targets. 2 of the agents in one of the cars were named Ben Grogan and Jerry Dove. They were headed toward the Barnett Bank, which they believed might be a possible target. On their way there, something unexpected happened. A black Chevrolet Monte Carlo appeared on the road ahead. When they got closer and saw the license plate, it read NTG 891. Jose's plate. It was his car, which could only mean one thing. The 2 thieves were inside and driving it themselves. They hadn't even bothered to change the plate, probably because they didn't expect Jose to survive. They never thought the FBI would find him, or that he'd tell them everything, or that investigators would eventually link his car to the robberies. The agents in the patrol car couldn't believe their eyes. One of them quickly grabbed the radio and alerted the other patrols. "We're currently tailing Jose's car. The thieves are in it, and we're right behind them." As soon as the message reached the other teams, they immediately started heading toward the location their colleagues had described. Eventually, one of the other patrol cars caught up and started following behind the first car that was tailing the suspects. Of course, by now, the thieves were getting suspicious. They started looking behind and saw 2 cars following them. To confirm their doubts, they made a right turn into a quiet residential neighborhood. The 2 FBI cars followed. Then the suspects made another right turn, and the cars were still behind them. That's when the thieves knew for sure they were being followed. The FBI agents in the 2 cars were deliberately stalling, trying to buy time until the rest of their team could catch up, because the more cars they had, the easier it would be to surround the suspects and take control of the situation. The 2 thieves, even though they knew they were being pursued, didn't try to speed up. Instead, they turned left and took the road leading to the highway, which, of course, posed a serious problem for the investigators. If the thieves managed to reach the highway and the chase continued there, it could put many lives in danger. Fortunately, just moments later, a 3rd FBI patrol car joined the pursuit. Now there were 3 vehicles trailing the thieves' car. At that point, the investigators in the first car, right behind the suspects, saw the man in the passenger seat raise a weapon, specifically a rifle. It became clear that these criminals weren't planning to surrender quietly. They were ready for a fight. Realizing the situation, the investigators knew they had to stop them immediately. Agent Ben Grogan turned on the police lights and ordered them to pull over using the loudspeaker, but the thieves didn't respond. The agents pulled up beside the suspect's car and repeated the command, but it was clear the thieves had no intention of complying. That's when the first patrol car moved ahead to block their path, while the second car boxed them in from the side, and the third remained behind. The suspect's car was now trapped, 1 vehicle in front, 1 beside them, and 1 behind. The FBI agents kept shouting at the criminals, ordering them to stop the vehicle, but the thieves just gave them a cold stare and kept driving as if nothing was happening. At that point, the agents had no choice but to try to stop them by force. They started trying to push the suspect's car off course, but the man in the passenger seat raised his rifle and tried to aim at the car next to them. When the agent in the rear patrol car saw that, he immediately rammed into the back of the suspect's vehicle. He wasn't about to let them shoot at his fellow agents. The thieves then attempted a U-turn, but the agent behind them kept pushing until he forced their car into a nearby parking lot. The suspect's car crashed into several parked vehicles and came to a stop. At that point, the man in the passenger seat grabbed his Mini-14 rifle and opened fire on the agent who had rammed them. The agent quickly exited his vehicle and took cover from the gunfire. Immediately after, the rest of the FBI agents involved in the chase arrived. They all drew their weapons and began firing at the suspects. But the criminals had the upper hand in terms of firepower. The FBI agents were armed with standard-issue pistols, while the passenger had a Mini-14 rifle and the driver had a shotgun. Military-grade weapons compared to what the agents had. Still, the FBI agents outnumbered them, so the criminals were surrounded, yet they still refused to surrender. The driver, who had a shotgun, managed to hit Agent Ben Grogan with one of his shots, but it didn't kill him. After that, another agent named McNeil managed to seriously wound the driver in the neck. But the driver's partner, who was armed with a Mini-14 rifle, began firing heavily at the agents. The problem was that his rifle had a 30-round magazine, while the FBI agents' pistols only held 5 or 6 rounds each before needing to be reloaded. So the criminal had a much higher rate of fire, and he started hitting the agents one by one. One of them was shot in the hand, and then another agent, named Edmundo Morales, was trying to advance when he was badly injured in the arm. The battle was intense. During the fight, the criminal with the Mini-14 tried to get out of their car through the window, but one of the agents managed to shoot him in the chest. For a moment, the agents thought they had taken him down, but to their surprise, the criminal got up again and ambushed Agent McNeil, hitting him with a serious neck wound. By that point, most of the agents were wounded. A backup unit arrived with 2 more agents who joined the fight, but despite everything, the criminal kept fighting all of them. His movements were those of a trained professional. There's no way a regular person, even with superior firepower, could have held his ground alone against all those agents. He wasn't just standing there defending himself. He was maneuvering between the cars, advancing, and putting pressure on the agents. It was an offensive strategy like he had nothing to lose. And because of the limited capacity of the agents' pistol magazines, they kept running out of ammo quickly. 3 of them had to retreat behind one of the cars to reload their weapons. These agents were Ben Grogan, Jerry Dove, and John Hanlon. They were trying to reload as fast as they could, but the criminal noticed what they were doing. He quickly maneuvered around the agents who were still firing at him from a distance and advanced toward the 3 who were reloading. He opened fire on them, first hitting one in the hand, then shooting him again in the upper thigh. Then he swiftly turned to the other 2, shot the first, then the second in lethal spots, killing them on the spot. All the agents who were around the criminal were either injured or killed. Only 2 agents remained, firing at him from a distance. The criminal then headed toward one of the FBI vehicles and tried to start it to escape. Of course, the car had taken several bullets during the shootout, so it wouldn't start. One of the agents who had been injured during the battle was Edmundo Morales, but he was still able to move and had a shotgun in his hand. When he saw the criminal heading toward the car, he began trying to shoot at him. At that moment, the second criminal, who was the driver and had been shot in the neck, somehow managed to move despite his severe and critical injury. He climbed out of the car window, trying to catch up with his partner and escape with him. Agent Edmundo Morales intensified his fire on the car. There was no way he was going to let them get away after everything that had happened. After firing the last shotgun round he had, he gathered all his strength, pulled out his handgun, and got up. He later said he wasn't even conscious of what he was doing at that moment. His injury should have made it impossible for him to move at all. But adrenaline can do wonders to the human body. It gives you strength even when you're on the verge of death. Morales approached the car, raised his pistol, and opened fire on the criminals, continuing to shoot until he killed them both on the spot. That marked the end of the violent battle. Shortly afterward, emergency forces and paramedics arrived and began treating the wounded agents. The scene was extremely brutal. 5 agents had been seriously injured, and 2 agents were killed, in addition to the 2 criminals who were also killed. This battle is considered the bloodiest in FBI history. Afterward, the FBI decided to upgrade their agents' weapons and provide them with stronger firepower. The 2 agents who were killed were Agent Jerry Dove, 30 years old, and Agent Ben Grogan, 53 years old, who was just 1 year away from retirement. If you remember, these were the same two agents who first spotted the criminal's vehicle. As for Agent Edmundo Morales, who killed the criminals at the end of the battle, he was awarded the Federal Medal of Valor. He was the first FBI agent ever to receive that medal. He later went on to write a book describing the details of this operation and the battle. In any case, after the battle, FBI investigators documented everything that happened, including the positions of the agents and their vehicles, based on the testimonies of the surviving agents. And believe it or not, during the shootout, the criminals fired 143 rounds. That number was determined by counting the spent shell casings found at the scene. But now the question remains, who were these two men? The investigators took fingerprints from the bodies, and through them, they identified who they were. The first criminal was named Michael Platt, 32 years old. He was the one carrying the Mini-14 rifle and was responsible for killing the two agents and causing most of the injuries during the shootout. The second criminal was William Matix, 34 years old, and he was the one with the shotgun. The big question here is, who were these two men? And why did they do all this? The answer was a surprise to the investigators. These men weren't gang members or typically violent people in their everyday lives. On the contrary, they were family men with wives and children. They were business partners and owned a small landscaping company. Imagine that. They used to design and decorate gardens. Their lives seemed peaceful. They had friends and acquaintances, played golf with their buddies, and were generally kind and polite with those around them. They had no criminal records whatsoever. It was as if they were living double lives, presenting one face to their families and friends while hiding their criminal side, only revealing it to each other. The FBI also uncovered another important detail after digging into their backgrounds. Both men had served in the military, and that's actually how they met. Michael Platt, in particular, had been an officer in the Army Special Forces, a ranger highly skilled in marksmanship. The difference between the kind of military training Platt received and the training FBI agents go through is huge. FBI agents are mostly trained in investigation, analysis, and defensive tactics. Their goal isn't usually to kill the suspect, but to surround and force them to surrender. And that was very clear during the shootout. Most of the agents tried to stay behind cover, hiding behind cars, while on the other side, Michael Platt kept advancing and applying pressure with his superior firepower, classic offensive military tactics. That's what allowed him to take them on despite being outnumbered. When the investigators dug deeper, they discovered a cabin owned by the two criminals. Inside, they found ammo, some of their weapons, and among them was the rifle they had stolen from Jose out in the wilderness. But the surprises didn't end there. As they continued to investigate the pasts of both men, the FBI uncovered that each had a previous wife, besides their current ones. And, shockingly, their ex-wives had both died under mysterious circumstances. William Matix's former wife, Patricia Matix, died in 1983. She was a lab technician at a hospital in Ohio. One evening in December 1983, while working late in the lab with a colleague, an unknown man suddenly broke in and attacked them. Later, both women were found dead inside the lab, their hands tied and their throats slit. William Matix was one of the suspects in the case, but there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime. In the end, he even managed to collect a $350,000 life insurance payout on his wife, a likely motive for the murder. But again, no evidence. To this day, the case remains unsolved. As for his partner, Michael Platt, he was also married. His wife, Regina Platt, was found dead in December 1984 with a shotgun wound to her mouth. The weapon was found in her hands, and the police ruled it a suicide. Even though everyone around her insisted she wasn't depressed and had no motive to take her own life. There were suspicions around Michael Platt, especially because the couple had serious marital issues. But once again, there was no solid evidence to charge him. And that brings us to the end of our story. If you enjoyed it, Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.